Hello, everybody. We are going to get started in about a minute, but we're going to let everybody go on and filter in. Welcome to Preparing for the New NJSLS-Science, What School Leaders Need to Know. And my name is Liz Hermoso. Everyone's going to be trickling in. I just wanted to let you know that we have a moderator with us, so feel free to ask questions at any time with the Q&A feature. And those questions will be answered, and if there's something that we need to talk about with the larger group, we'll just get to that at the end. But I'm looking forward to a really fun session with everybody. Okay. So as everyone's settling in, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Liz Hermoso. I'm here with Inspired Instruction. I've been with Inspired Instruction for 5 years. And over the last 5 years, I have been working with schools all over the state, mostly with science teachers, and loving it. And I'm here mostly because I like any opportunity to talk about science, but we're also here because they just redid the standards and we're going to find out what's in there. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. So we're so glad you're here. Feel free to share in the chat about where you're joining us from, and what your role is at your school. Are you a curriculum developer, administrator, a teacher, whatever your role is. And again, we are going to have a Q&A feature running the whole time. We have a moderator who can answer some questions as we go, so don't feel like you have to hold it in your head. You can just ask as it pops into your mind. And we will have a Q&A question at the end as a section at the end as well. So feel free to come up with any questions and share. We are here again with Inspired Instruction. We work with schools all over. Now we're moving beyond New Jersey into a lot of other states as well. We work with educators on every topic, and our drive is just to help do things that really work in classrooms that make a real difference for students. And so we're going to get started today with the science standards. So we are here because every 5 years they have to redo the science standards and revise. But what they did makes a lot of sense based on what we're seeing across the state. What we've been seeing with the science scores, not as high as we would like, but also we see a lot of patterns, especially with elementary science in those foundational years. It's really hard to fit science time in. A very common elementary science schedule is 2 to 3 30-minute periods a week. And it's just hard to fit all of the things we want our littles to be studying into one day. So it's understandable, but it is a challenge. Another common concern we're seeing across the state with all the schools we've been working with is some concerns coming from in science the years that the test happens. So the fifth grade teachers, the eighth grade teachers, and the 11th grade teachers feeling the pressure that they have to spiral review and cover all of this material before the test, when really it's vertical alignment and everyone on the same team, because these tests start measuring everything from third grade on up. And so everyone in that grade band is a part of this. So those are some of the concerns we're seeing, is that with the test score, the test being taken every 3 years, that we see some struggles with that. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the changes that they've made to address exactly these concerns. Here's a quick data shot of where the science scores are in relation to the math and ELA scores. So you can see kind of where we're trying to go, trying to build our students up. So what are we going to do today? We are going to talk about the most significant revisions that they made. There's really not a lot, which is nice. So I'm going to start that off. It's not a lot of earth-shattering changes when we come to science, which is awesome. The coding is the same. The majority of the PEs, the performance expectations, are the same. So that's awesome. We will talk about what changes they did and what impact that will have on our curriculum and instructional practice. We're going to talk a lot about the developmental progressions, or the learning progressions that they put together, and how powerful those can really be for vertical alignment, differentiation, and just understanding what we're doing in science class. And then we'll talk about what you have to do now to be compliant for this coming year, 26-27, because the science standards updates are being implemented this coming school year, so just a few short weeks away. So we'll talk about what needs to be done before then. Luckily, not a lot, so don't worry. All right, so what's new and why did they do it? The changes can be broken down into these four things. We backed off a little bit of that big climate change push in K to 3, which I'll get to in just a moment, not because of any necessary statement, but because of where the students are developmentally and how abstract climate change is as a concept. They only changed the text in four PEs, mostly dealing with this climate change adjustment for K to 3. They streamlined the document mostly to match what the math and ELA documents look like in New Jersey, but also because by streamlining the document, it becomes much more accessible, user-friendly, and very easy to use when we're doing things like writing curriculum. So it is a very usable document. The big change was that they put together these learning progressions, which we'll get to towards the end of the webinar, and those are really powerful. And again, it's actually not any new information. They just took the same PEs that they did not change the text of for most of them and laid them out so you can see how these skills build, which is really cool. So we'll get into that shortly. We'll start with the climate change rewrites in K to 2. So really what they did was remove just the phrase climate change in two of the standards for kindergarten. The engineering standard where we're building, so we're not trying to build something to fix climate change. They're in kindergarten and first and second grade, and it's just too big of a concept for them. But it actually is very powerful to remove the feeling that we have to be addressing climate change with our kindergarten students. Now we are opened up to being able to do so many awesome projects with our littlest scientists and really take them out and have them do projects and activities that help them really feel like they are a part of taking care of and protecting the land and water and air around them. So the other text, they removed the climate change text in the earth science one that talks about human impacts on the environment. So now instead of trying to figure out how we're going to talk about climate change up in the atmosphere with our very concrete learners, we can do things like pick up trash on the playground or maybe a local stream and have the students really see the impact that they have on the environment, maybe in a negative way with the litter there, and then a positive way when we clean it up. So that is really powerful for kindergarten students or youngest students because it's developmentally appropriate, it's concrete, they can see the impact, they can see their own impact. And we know as adults that there's not necessarily an immediate tie to picking litter up off a playground and climate change. However, and we'll get into this when we talk about the developmental progressions push, what we're doing with our youngest learners is setting this really strong foundation of concepts and ideas that will build into much more complex discussions that they can have as they age. So especially as we get into the middle and high school years, we can start to deal with these big ideas, and we have to really set a strong foundation with our youngest learners for these concepts. So for example, human impact on the environment. There are fantastic ways to do that, like picking up litter or cleaning up a local stream, and they may not have an immediate tie to climate change, and that's okay because for these students, it's awesome and powerful. So that's the change. It's actually really great. It's understanding where our students are developmentally. There's also one change in grade 3. It's a very long along the same line. So it's actually in K to 3, they backed off. And then from fourth grade on up, we start to get a little bit more complex. So for third grade, it's also a refocus on the basics for the Earth standards that's talking about weather and extreme weather. We really want our students to understand how weather usually works in a given region, how it's supposed to work and what's normal for that reason, what kind of storms and weather-related hazards are actually normal for that area in order to later on figure out how it's changing and that's weird. So also studying forecasting. How do we know what might be coming? How do we know what hazards are coming up? So that is an important foundational piece that was missing if we jumped right into climate change and everything changing. First, we really have to study what it's supposed to be in the first place in order to understand that it's changing. So that is a really key foundational goal that will build to later years. Taking the time to actually learn these foundations will pay off dividends as we get old with our students. They also changed the PE performance expectation in one high school standard. It's also earth science. They did not necessarily take climate change out of this one, but what they did do was help to specify how complex our students in high school can be thinking about with some of these ideas. So They took out the text cost benefit ratio, although cost and benefits are actually still in here. They just moved them around. They added conserving. When we're talking about energy and mineral resources, they added the word for conserving those, which is an important piece that was missing. And then they brought in all of these different layers that our high school students can be thinking about with these big ideas. When we get to high school, we really want them to start broadening their thinking with these layers and global thinking and butterfly effect, the whole idea they can get abstract at this age. So when we're talking about energy and mineral resources, we want to talk about developing, conserving, managing. We want to think about economic, social, environmental, geopolitical layers. There's a lot to unpack here. So they added text to show exactly how much our high schoolers can be thinking and discussing and addressing as they are addressing these kind of topics. Also, those discussions can be really rich in a qualitative way. So by taking out the word ratio in here, that cost benefit ratio, it takes the pressure off of the teachers from trying to find a way to quantify these things with numbers and keep them abstract and have these rich discussions instead, which actually can be so much more powerful. So as I mentioned, they streamlined the NJSLS-Science documents, which means that they took out what was basically each one of these performance expectations had its own page with the foundation boxes and the DCIs and the science and engineering practices. And so each one of these standards had a whole page or so to itself, and it was a really big, sometimes scary document. But now all of that is gone, and it's just a list of the PEs the way you see here. These are two screenshot samples. So again, very accessible, very easy to use when you're plugging into your different curriculum documents or lesson planning. However, I do want to caution that all of that other information that was there, those foundation boxes, the red text, which is actually really super powerful, none of that is actually gone. It's not a thing that we no longer have to address. They just moved it. I'll show you where they moved it to in a second. But especially if you're talking about curriculum and you're talking with your teachers and you're talking about supporting them, that red text that was in these standards is really powerful. When I'm working with teachers all across the state, a lot of times our attention ends up focusing on that red text because it had clarification statements with ideas for how to address these in a lesson. And almost more importantly, the assessment boundaries, which are technically written for the test writers for what's out of bounds. But the reason they placed those boundaries there was because of what is developmentally appropriate for that age. And also so that you don't feel like you have to teach everything that the next level is going to get. So the elementary level was a certain place because it's concrete. Middle school had a certain level because their students are not quite there with the math, and then everything else was in high school. So looking at those assessment boundaries that were here was actually really powerful for things like pacing and knowing when to stop. Because sometimes as science teachers, we feel this push to teach everything about how awesome the entire universe is in 1 year, and you can't. It's just not possible. So that was a permission to stop point. So really powerful. I'll show you where all that text is because it's not actually gone. However, this document is very nice and easy to use now, which is nice. So what do we have to do this year for implementation for this coming school year? Luckily, not a whole lot. So in your curriculum documents, you do want to make sure that those 4 PEs, whatever is appropriate for your building's age level, are edited. So when you get this recording, you can just rewind and see, but I also will show you where a document is that spells out the changes that they made and why. So only 4 PEs, 2 kindergarten, 1 3rd grade, and 1 high school. And then while you're in with your curriculum, you don't necessarily need all of that red text in the foundation boxes because they did take it out of the standards. However, I put a note here, it's still really super powerful. So we still want to think about that when we're especially unit planning and thinking about how to bring all of those in because they're not actually gone. They're just not in that particular document. While you're in cleaning up your science standards for this coming year, you do want to keep in mind that the career readiness and key skills standards were just updated. They're coming in another year, but while you're in there cleaning up, you might as well get ahead of it. The computer science standards were also redone. Now, those were a bigger overhaul. The coding is different, the text is different. They shuffled things around, so that's a big rewrite. Math and ELA, also bigger rewrites. Those happened within the last couple of years, but depending on your cycle and your personal building for when you've updated your science standards, you may need to take a look at your math and ELA to make sure that that coding and text is all the most updated version. So while you're in there, these are all the things that have changed recently. Those interdisciplinary ties, and then just those four tiny little edits in science itself. But there's all those things. Luckily, editing those texts and literally just deleting out the words climate change should take only a few minutes and you're done, which is awesome. Updating the other interdisciplinary ties might take a little bit more, but as far as a curriculum rewrite goes, it's really not that big of an ask when it comes to science, which is nice. So now, the other thing that they did, and this is a push that you will be seeing across some of the other standards as well, is this idea of learning progressions, and they can have a really strong impact on instructional practice. It shows a really powerful vertical alignment opportunity. I'll show you some of these in a minute. It helps us understand wherever our teachers are in that K to 12 spectrum, what is the most important focus for that grade level and what builds into it, and then where can we possibly go if our students are rock stars and they're nailing it? Where can we stretch? This is a really great opportunity for grades to do vertical articulation and have those meetings where they get to see what projects and topics and favorite labs those other teachers are doing in the other grades and find ways to build off of what students are doing and not have redundancies where we're doing the same lab over and over again, but we do it again, but better and deeper because they're aging. We can see maybe what gaps are missing because these teachers have these favorites and these teachers have these favorites and where all of the continuity is in our K to 12 learning. So this can be really powerful. And I'll show you these documents in a minute, and they're easy to see that as a spread. So it helps our students or it helps us to design units for our students so that they can be doing these increasingly sophisticated and deeper tasks and deeper thinking as they age. It also helps with differentiation. So again, you know exactly what the focus is at that particular level and what builds up to it and where does it go. So we always want to have our students have access to grade level content. So even if we know we need to build up from some skill gaps, we can do that in a way that they're still discussing things at their level with these awesome discourse and rigor and awesome questioning strategies. And then we can use those to kind of also pull up some of those missing skills into that discussion. So really important for spiral learning and just help support long-term mastery by understanding how each of these things are really building and addressing it appropriately. So it really helps our teachers to see where our students are in this gradient from K to 12, as opposed to thinking of a unit as something that starts on this month and finishes here in this assessment, and then we're done. So it helps us to keep in mind that our students are learning this on this really long 12-year progression. So here is an example. So there's no new information here, which is nice. We really just took the performance expectations and mapped them as the students grow here. So this example is a physical science example. They have them grouped by the topic, so the disciplinary core idea. This is conservation of energy and energy transfer. You can see just with the amount of text as they grow, as they age from K to 12. But when we unpack these, there's a lot of really awesome, important things that we can see in here. For example, how the skills build over time. So our youngest students are just making observations and asking a lot of questions, which we know our kindergarten and first grade is very good at because they spend hundreds of hours practicing the skill of asking questions. But then as they age, we start refining those questions to have them ask better questions and use those questions to predict some outcomes. And this, as they are actually learning some more facts, finally, when we get to middle school, they start applying the scientific principles that they've been learning to test ideas and plan investigations and come up with an argument. And then when we get to high school, there's really this big push for math because we never really know where they're taking algebra until high school. In math, we create computational models as opposed to maybe a drawing. And we plan and conduct investigations to collect evidence. So we can see how the skills build, but just by looking here. We can also see how the topic builds. From for energy, our kindergartner students are noticing that sunlight makes things hot. For example, that slide on the playground that always burns their legs. So we could take them outside and measure temperatures of things and notice that things in the sun are hot and things that are in the shade are not as hot. And you could see how that skill builds all the way up through 9 to 12 when we start studying, thermal energy and collisions and energy transfers. So you can really see how that skill builds. Here's another example. This is a life science example. This is the classic photosynthesis right in here. So again, we see how those topics build. We can see how the understanding of photosynthesis can build over time. So patterns of what plants need to survive. It was once energy from the sun, and then we learned that word photosynthesis in middle school, and we finally start studying the actual model, the carbon and hydrogen and oxygen molecules in high school. And then we can see how that's layered with animals. So animals need food. The food actually came from the sun. And then as we break it down, that's how we get our energy and our growth and how we can continue to build up this body of a muscle. And then in 9 to 12, we get abstract again and we start learning about molecules and amino acids and cellular respiration. So you can see them grow. So again, this is not any new information. It's all the same PEs, but when you really kind of unpack them, you can see these patterns grow and it's really powerful. So one thing that we will send out after this webinar is over, this is a document. It's just a really quick, easy template to kind of take that information that we can see on those progressions and use this to plan a lesson. Now, I do want to specify that this is a mastery rubric, which is different than a grading rubric. So for a mastery rubric, the idea is that we expect the students at whatever grade level we're addressing to start on the left, and they're not graded or penalized for that. That's where they expect to be. That's the mastery coming up from the grades below. So now that we have those developmental progressions, we know what that is and what they should be able to do. And then throughout the course of a unit or a year or whatever we're planning, we are hoping that they move from the left over to the right. And again, there's no grade penalization for this because we expect them to start to the left and hopefully move over to the right, from developing these skills to being proficient at these skills, which is grade level appropriate and awesome. And then mastering these skills, which actually is mastering at grade level and maybe a little bit beyond that, which would be awesome. And now that we have these developmental progressions, we know what that next step is, looking at forward. So that's awesome. Other great ways to support your teachers with the science standards is allowing time for that vertical alignment to happen. It doesn't have to happen often, luckily. Beginning of the year, end of the year, how did they do last year? What did we actually get to this year? Maybe one in the middle to kind of see how we're going. Grade level planning and PLC time can be really powerful for science. In the beginning, I mentioned that one of the biggest challenges we have is how little elementary time can be dedicated to science, and there's a lot of reasons why. However, if we do some grade level planning in PLC and we know what's happening in the other disciplines and we know what's happening in math and in ELA and where the curriculum overlines, and we can find ways to have those topics piggyback off of each other and build into maybe like a thematic unit or something like that. The little bit of time we spend on science can be the lab activity that we just read about in ELA. And then we did math problems about in math time, and they can start to really build together. And that can really maximize your science time. And it can also help the students to really solidify that information because they're seeing how it can be used in so many ways. So that's really powerful. It does take planning time for the teachers to be able to see where these overlaps are and talk to each other about who's touching the topic first and who's going to build on what. And so really super powerful for the teachers to be able to talk to each other. Because of this push with the progressions, formative assessment is really important with something like a mastery rubric to see where the students are when we get them in September. What did they remember? What do we have to reteach a little bit? And then taking some really specific actions on that data and moving them forward throughout the year and then handing them off the next year. And also having some extension activities ready. So when our students are doing well, what else can they be thinking about? What other awesome questions can we give them? What applications can they do? It's not just busy work, but how can we take these same standards that we were addressing in this particular unit and just think about them in such an awesome way? So lots of things that we can see that the new rewrite with the progressions can help us with science. It's really awesome. So these are all of the resources that you're going to get to go along with this recording or if you're joining us live, you'll still get this in your email later. The most important one is obviously the new official NJSLS-Science document. It was officially approved on June 3rd, 2026. So that's done and official and ready to go for this fall. Um, so that's really important. There's also, just as important, the Standards, Transparency, and Mastery platform. So this is a web page put together by the state. On this webpage, it has the revisions document that explains exactly what was changed and why. It has the framework documents I talked about, and I'll show you a quick screenshot of that in a minute, that has all of the information that used to be in the science standards that are still applied. We're still being held to that. It's just in a different document, and that document looks like this. So they basically took what it was. It looks a little bit different, but it's the same idea. There's the red text. Again, super important for your teachers to be aware of it. It helps with pacing. It helps with burnout. It helps with knowing when to stop your unit and move on to whatever you need to cover next. It has the skill building, the science and engineering practices. It has the disciplinary core ideas, which they put into that learning progression. And all the cross-cutting concepts where we can tie to the other topics and the other interdisciplinary ties so they can be really powerful for those thematic units especially. So all of these things will be given to you. Most of them you can find on they call it the STAMP platform. Also a quick internet search can find that. So NJDOE STAMP platform should hopefully bring you right there. And all of this is in there. The standards themselves are in a different page. They're on the standards page. But again, you'll get all of this later, including that mastery rubric template to go ahead and start using as you have your teachers plan some units for this fall. Okay. So that's everything that I have. We have some time here now for any questions that anybody wants to ask. We have a moderator standing by ready, so you can just type into that Q&A function on the bottom. And if your question has not been answered already, we have some time now for questions because they are a very important part of science. It's what keeps science moving forward. All right. And if we don't have any questions, feel free to reach out to Inspired Instruction for at info@inspiredinstruction.com. We love to hear your feedback. There's a QR code here as well as a tiny URL. We would love to hear if this webinar answered your questions and made you feel better about how little the changes were and feel empowered with all the cool things we can do now. And we would love to hear from you about maybe what other webinars you'd like to hear coming up in the future. But thank you so much for sharing your very precious time. I know how busy everyone is and all the different directions we're being pulled. So thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope it was quick and easy and powerful. And I wish everyone a wonderful year coming up. Thank you so much.